Good evening, everyone. Tonight, ISAR Aerospace in Germany fails its first launch test. In other news, space is hard. The FAA has closed its investigation into Starship's most recent failure. But nevertheless, NASA has added Starship to the roster of vehicles under the NLS-2 contract. Rick Tumlinson proposes a new and better model for an Artemis 2.0. Can we really have our cake and eat it too? Can we really do the moon and Mars at the same time? We're going to find out. From the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. Oh, thank you, Sean. My producer is experimenting with new music styling, so you're going to see a lot more of that in the weeks ahead. As you know, this program is hosted by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. What is that? What do we do? We champion and strengthen emerging space startups, space scalable small and medium businesses, and space adjacent enterprises worldwide through advisory, access, and advocacy across the funding spectrum. Our programs fortify business plans and investor readiness for founding teams at various levels of development. One of our latest initiatives, of course, is our monthly space microgrants, where we award $1,000 to an aspiring startup. Now, since this is the last day of March, March is still open if someone wants to apply at the very last second. The form is going to be right here on the screen in a second. It's called spacemicrofund.com if you want to apply. Or starting tomorrow, you can apply for April. The form is right there. It's very, very easy to submit. And we also encourage our listeners, obviously, and all our fans to help support microgrants. So if you go to Space Microfund, you go to the bottom of the page, there is a link button to our support portal where you'll get the option of a one-time gift or a monthly subscription. Think about it. $50 to $100 a month is not a lot of money, but for 6 months or more, it helps a lot of new firms get out of the garage. So joining me now is one of my podcast producers, entrepreneur, and my oldest space friend, Michael Lane from Liftport. Michael, get in here. God, get in here. Hey, you doing, man?
How's things? I'm good. I'm good. We're both feeling better now.
So we're both feeling better. I'm still taking a little stuff just to keep the tickle down, but yeah, I'm getting sleep again. I'm feeling okay. God, the bicoastal rhinovirus or whatever it was we had.
Bicoastal.
Yeah. So we had.
But you're traveling next week.
I am traveling next week. I am on the road. Next Sunday afternoon, I'll be going to Colorado Springs for the much vaunted Space Symposium, and it's supposed to be great. But thousands of people show up for this thing. In fact, a lot of people, like I always encourage people to go to the conferences and maybe buy a ticket. In this case, I don't know. The full ticket for the package is like $2,000 or something. So it's not high on everyone's list if you're on a low budget. But the things you can do. I mean, I've got some entree to some stuff, and so I've got a little. Just because I'm a podcaster now, so I get to see some things that. So it's not a big deal for me, but. A lot of people show up, it turns out, just to have meetings. And so they're in the second floor of that massive hotel where they have this. That's where everybody's really hanging. People go in. You can get a free pass to the exhibit hall. You can see stuff there. Sometimes you can go in and see some special shows. You've got if a buddy of yours is speaking at a thing, they'll let you in because your buddy insists. But most of the time, a lot of people just hang out, and that's where they take their meetings and do their deals. And I'm going to be doing the same thing. So Monday show, Michael, you'll be in charge of that because the first 2 days of that conference is absolutely insane. I'll probably be doing 18-hour days both of those days. And I'll slow down a little on Wednesday, and on Thursday it'll be winding down. So I'll definitely do the show on Thursday night, and I'll have a wrap-up show of all the stuff that I did and saw and people I met at the Space Symposium. Cool. So that'll be a great show. And also a possibility, and since we're winding up the month of March today, by the time we do that show, we will know who our March microgrant winner is.
That winner, right? Yeah.
We can have them on for a little bit and introduce them to the world. So a lot of that coming up on April.
Well, and that's one of the reasons you're going to the symposium in the first place. So fingers crossed to meet sponsors and funders for our business plan competitions in maybe Austin. That's still TBD.
Yep. I've still got. I do have a couple of meetings booked, and there's more in the pipeline. So and you never know who you're going to meet. So
cool.
I found that out just at the last one I went to. It's pretty wild, and so that's all. There's a lot of follow up going on there. Okay, there's a new player in the small sat launch business. It didn't quite do so well in their very first time out. ISAR Aerospace in Germany. Yeah, they're only up there for about maybe 47 seconds or something, and it came crashing down again. But even Elon, there they are. And these guys, even Elon Musk sent them a note and said, "Hey, it took us 8 tries to get the first Falcon, into orbit. So, keep trying. Good on you." And
good on you.
That was cool.
Yeah. No, it is. It's really great. The thing that I think is actually kind of not being talked about as much is that this is Europe's first orbital mission in a really long time.
That's true.
I couldn't actually find a reference for how long, but they've been flying off the coast of South America for, I don't know, 2 decades. What is it?
Well, the Ariane's
French Guiana, right?
The Ariane's flying out of Guyana. So yeah. And so we did see a test of an Ariane 6 last year, and they are but it's out of Guyana. It's not out of the continent.
Right. And I cannot figure out when the last time something flew from Europe Central, right? Mm-hmm. And so the UK is putting together, if you were to look at a map of spaceports in the world, the UK has something like 6 of them. It's unreasonable how many they have right now.
We've had that conversation. There are far more spaceports and capability for spaceports than we have, active companies launching stuff.
Yeah. Well, but this speaks to the, hey, look, here's an ad for Symposium. If you could click my screen.
Don't click it. Don't click it.
Don't click it. No. But this kind of speaks to the topic. Right, that Japan is building their own reusable rocket system. Israel is working on it. They're pretty far away. India is working on it for 2 different companies. China has 6 in the pipeline.
Oh yeah. Say more about China. They're moving forward fast and furious.
Many years ago, the folks over at Space Fund, they're like, do not send us a pitch for rocketry, because we're not doing it, because they were tracking 100+ companies.
Yep.
And the whole world was like, there's never going to be any more. And I'm like, sovereignty, nations want to be able to fly their own stuff from their own place. And so the sovereignty question says that Brazil will eventually have their own rocketry program.
Probably, and probably Saudi and a lot of places in the Middle East. They're awash in cash and they want a space presence.
Yeah.
And they'll pay through the nose to get it. So it's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. So interesting. Great. Good luck to these folks. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth the effort.
Absolutely. Now, interesting. I think it's kind of good news. The FAA today closed their investigation of the Starship Flight 7 explosion.
I have it, but I don't see it. Here we go.
Yeah. I'm looking for that too. I'm looking for this. I want to see that one thing.
Is there
Which
something you want to
is,
highlight?
well, I thought so. I thought so. I think, and I'm not in the right. I got two things going on by two different
Well, the
browsers.
thing that I thought was interesting was just it's a
Here it is.
vibrations
Here it is.
problem.
Here it is. Here it is.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it
What do you
was a
got?
vibration problem, and that's what it is. They traced an anomaly of there's also a propellant leak anomaly, but so it went well, and then it blew up, right? It
Right.
rained
Yeah.
down all this, stuff. But they traced it to a propellant leak, which was caused by a higher than expected harmonic response. They
Oh,
called
yeah.
it
Okay.
during flight. I've seen how that works. You've seen those old videos of how bridges collapse because of the
That
harmonic
bridge
response.
is on
Yeah,
my way to my mom's house. It's right outside
yes,
the
that
door.
bridge in particular, that famous
Yep.
one, and
Yep.
that's what happened.
Yep.
And so, and that's the root cause for the loss. It was the vehicle was stronger than anticipated vibrations during flight, which led to increased stress and failure of the hardware in the propulsion system, which I think, of course, is vaguely important.
Vaguely important. That's a
Yeah.
catchphrase for you.
Yeah, a failure of hardware in the propulsion system because of the
Right.
vibration. Yeah. That is vaguely important. And so they identify 11 corrective actions that they're going to do, and they're going to implement those prior to Flight 8.
Yeah. So there's no word on when Flight 8's going to happen, right?
No, not yet. They're not really. But I guess they investigated the Flight 7 and the New Glenn mishap reports. They were both closed the same day.
Yeah.
Neither incident, fortunately, caused any public injuries, and no New Glenn's failed return to Earth didn't damage any public property. There was, I guess, the debris from Starship Flight 7 did cause a confirmed report of minor vehicle damage in the Turks and Caicos. Where that
how do you submit that claim to Geico?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh God, yeah. I guess you had to send a form in with it, or something. So the other thing, which is kind of tied to it, I thought, despite all the issues and that all the issues they're having, with Starship Flight 7, but despite that, apparently NASA still has good warm and fuzzy feelings for Starship, because they formally expanded their launch services, the NLS-2 contract with SpaceX, to include Starship.
Yes.
Along with the currently contracted Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. And so that's their standard contract framework to enable NASA to procure commercial launch capability for a huge array of missions. And they call it I love this. They call it it structures a multiple award, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract.
Right. IDIQ.
We can buy as much as we want, whenever we want, for whatever we want.
I love that, but at the same time, isn't it kind of premature to register Starship at all?
I would think I would have waited until after the first successful orbital mission. Maybe.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I'm a believer that Starship is going to get there. They're trying to position themselves for contracts in the future, right? 2030 to 2032. Okay, that's fine, but don't you have to prove that you can succeed at the mission before you get approval for that? So I just thought it was a little early.
Yeah, they They used to have
Little
some kind
premature.
of standards for that. I mean, back in the back in the COTS days, when you got to qualify for the COTS contract, you had to hit a specific milestone.
Yeah.
Or you
It
didn't
was
get, or
everything
you
was
didn't get it.
milestone based. Yeah. Yeah, everything had to be milestone based over there once upon a time. So let's bring up Tomlinson's article for a second.
Absolutely. I want to get to that because it's more of a philosophical thing to say, here's how we can have our cake and eat it too and do it all. And this will segue into tonight's guest. So this is
perfect. It's kind of like, well, all right, so tell him what he's saying there, Tom.
Okay, basically he's okay. So Rick Tomlinson yesterday publishes this op-ed in Space News, and he's proposing a policy shift on NASA's part, which he calls Artemis 2.0. And in so doing, what he's really saying is that what if we let NASA go ahead and focus on Mars mostly as an agency, doing the R&D and building out the capability to go farther and faster and better than we've ever done before. At the same time, with using a little bit of stewardship, but not a lot of resource, they are going to basically turn the exploration and development of the moon over to the private sector. And so if we're going to privatize exploring the moon and landing on the moon again and settling it, and we're going to push the government program to actually do what a lot of us have said for many, many years. Hey, if we're going to have a space program paid for by the government, it should go someplace.
Yeah.
And so here's an idea where everybody gets what they want. They get a return to the moon. They get a big push to go to Mars, and you can spread those resources around more efficiently to make exactly like that happen if you unleash what the free market and free minds are capable of.
Absolutely. I only point this out, but because we just are talking about Starship getting potentially prematurely approved, but this CLIPS model has proven to be a really effective way of getting cash and technical development into the system of going to the moon. So
it's modeled on COTS a little bit.
It's COTS, absolutely COTS. Remind people what COTS was. It's the commercial
orbital transportation
systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to commercial off the shelf, which everybody in IT knows.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
But COTS was the original supply missions to the International Space Station. They were first cargo and then eventually crew.
Yep.
For those folks at home that want to know that Tom and I are old timers and been at this for a while, we were in the room when General Bolden was on stage at ISDC, International Space Development Conference.
Yep, when that first docking happened in real time, live, right behind him while he's talking.
In real time, right? I mean, and it was touchdown, and the crowd went wild. It was amazing.
Absolutely.
But that was the beginnings. That Doug Laverno put his career on a whole bunch of other folks at NASA. And Lori Garver put her career on the line. Like a lot of people bet
they did
real heavy on that.
They did.
And so CLIPS is the modern version.
Yeah. So rather than have, as Rick says, rather than have Artemis originate from some NASA central planning, command, and control structure like a Soviet era program,
right?
It would be a moon program designed around entrepreneurs and innovators and free market forces. And so that might catalyze an actual moon boom that should have happened a long time ago, but it didn't, and we know why. But I wanted to just end this. I wanted to go. He did say something that was really good. It's very cheeky, And he said, because we talk about the race with China. What are we going to do? How are we going to, be competitive with China and all this? And he said, we just change our answer. If we tell them, look, if you want to plant your flag and send back a selfie of the moon, fine.
Do it.
Been there, done that. We're going to Mars.
Right.
If you want to claim the best locations on the moon and develop lunar resources, okay. We, however, American companies and entrepreneurial institutions, we're going to be racing your ass to the best spots. So good luck with that. And hey, if you want to build a state-run industrial park, fine. We'll be founding the first real moon village for free people and free enterprises and free minds and free markets. And so bring it on.
Bring it on. Yeah.
I love it.
I love that. Reverend Rick gets me every.
He does.
There was a Space Frontier Foundation did an article a couple days ago about are you an O'Neillian, and we talked about that the other day, and so I responded to their LinkedIn post, and I referenced I like Sagan and von Braun and O'Neill, but my heroes are the ones that don't necessarily get all the name brand recognition. And I count my history as coming from two distinct groups, the ISU group of Diamandis and Richards and Hawley, and the Space Frontier Foundation, which is Tomlinson, Werb, and Muncie. And both of them were funded in their earliest days by Walt Anderson. And
absolutely,
like this group of people have laid the foundation for the world we're now beginning to take for granted. And it's just, they're pioneers. They did the work, and now we're lucky that they did that.
Yeah. And
Yes.
before we segue into the next thing, this is going to bring in our guest tonight. I just want to do just very quickly, because we're starting to get some regulars here. We're starting to get an audience. I just want to give a shout out to the few guys that are coming around every night. One is Doug Plata from that working group that you're talking about, and our very first fan, Morty Freeman, is here today. And thanks for all the ideas you guys add to the conversation along the side here. And Jason, Todd, Sprecher, welcome. I don't think I've seen you before. I think Michael may have.
I have. I've seen him on the show. Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome to all of you.
Yeah.
I know that. Sorry, I know there's other people watching that they don't sign in, but I know they're there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we love that. Appreciate it. And we do now moving Thursday schedule, so we were doing Tuesday, Thursday. So we'd love you all to, I know it sounds like cheesy cliche, but like and share, because that stuff matters. It tells other people that there's good content over here. So we really appreciate it.
And also make sure we can tell people to throw a little in the tip jar. We have that. If you're watching this tonight, there is a little QR code in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and you can take a shot of that. And Jason Todd is waving at us. So thanks for being here, man.
We really appreciate y'all. And then Todd, I really can't get into lunar elevator stuff on this show, so I'm going to post my LinkedIn connections, and just connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll answer your question, because the idea of a L1 point and a tether and a and a mission cycler is pretty important stuff. Okay.
Well, moving on.
Yeah.
In the world of
I want to post a few things for some folks here. Can you just give me 90 seconds here? There's two things I wanted to point out to our audience. Not trying to get into the politics of the world, y'all, but this guy, Michael Cressidos is coming in as the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House. He's a very interesting cat. This article from the White House, it's not an article, it's one of their directives, does kind of lay out an interesting future. Now, this guy has an AI background. I am posting his connection, his LinkedIn profile as well. But I think he's a closet space nerd. I can't be sure of that, but that's another potential ally at the White House. Now, we hope that Jared Isaacman winds up as the NASA administrator, so we're definitely rooting for that. And we're rooting for Greg Autry to be the Dr. Greg Autry to be the chief financial officer. But this guy here, I don't know him. I don't know anything about him other than what I've read publicly. But
well, maybe
ally in the
he can be a guest on the show sometime.
So no response yet.
Okay.
Another thing that came out from Aerospace Corporation actually it was a couple of weeks ago. I didn't. Doctors Kuzman and Whedon. I know both of them professionally pretty well. Super smart folks. The future of national policy as they see it. This Space 5 has got about 10 different. They're saying, look, go take a look at this. The time to act is now. Change is urgent. Recognizing the policy drives stuff, but they're not our biggest problem. Think commercial first. Improve the interface between government and industry and investor, and understand the markets. Implement a national commercial space strategy. I can't tell you how excited I am to see that. This document's really worth the read. It's not super long. It's 11 pages. It is dense packed with really useful stuff. So take a look at that. And the last thing is A16Z is one of the big Silicon Valley name brands. There are kind of name brands out there. And Reason is one of the people who started the internet. That's not sarcasm. He's one of the people who started the World Wide Web. They're doing something different that they haven't been doing for a while. This 12-week program is called a speed run. There's $1 million up for grabs. They tend to focus. There's $1 million per company selected, not $1 million to be divided. $1 million per company selected. They tend to focus really on digital programs. So I don't know how many people listening to this are where that applies to, but it's an interesting program. It shouldn't be ignored, and blessings from A16Z have ripple effects throughout the whole industry. So just want to point that out. They are closing this cover at the end of next month, so you have a little bit of time. All right, moving on. Sorry about that, Tom. Didn't want to drag that out, but it's useful research
to me. Our guest has been waiting. On the issue of, again, colonizing Mars, settling Mars, getting out there. I love to talk to people who are on the biology side of things, because when we go out into the solar system, biology is everything, and that's going to be the key to us having a sustainable human presence anywhere we go. We got to grow stuff, and we have to breathe, and we have to eat it. So Our guest tonight is Daniel Tompkins. He's a founder of an organization called GrowMars. Um, he's a doctor of plant medicine from the University of Florida. He owns a company called DIY Service LLC for agricultural research. He has a lifelong interest for helping plants grow and provide food through the understanding and practice of plant science, agricultural systems, and environmental concerns through a very diverse 20-plus year career. He also founded and is leading an X Prize Rainforest team into the semifinals. He has contributed to the field of plant disease diagnostic labs and advanced crop consulting services for fruit and vegetable growers. And Daniel has in-depth experience with lab and field operations and is knowledgeable in diversity of cropping systems, organic, conventional, open field, and greenhouse hydroponics within the USA and internationally. So his yeah, thank you for saying that about me. I'm a closeted biologist. Yeah, you're probably right about that. Anyway, we'll get his company website on there, and we'll have him join us right now. So, Dr. Tompkins, how are you? Thanks for being so patient with us.
Sorry.
So, in the theme of winning a new moon race and crafting a two-planet space policy, let's turn to Mars. And in that long question, how will we live there, and what are we going to eat?
It's a great question, and I love talking about the business side of this too, because I really think that is, it's ecology is the economics of biology, right? That's one way that it's described. And when we go out into space, we're totally independent from Earth systems. So really, whether it's the business economics is how do you have a system that keeps growing? And like you mentioned, wherever we go, we're going to have to grow something, but more importantly, that we grow our resource capacity. So there's a lot of, do we do things biologically? Do we do things totally synthetically? How do we really have a system that keeps expanding independent of Earth's natural resources is something that has very little effort behind, I should say.
Okay, so taking all this stuff, I mean, you build these systems, you experiment with a lot of different things. I guess my question is then, it always concerns me when we first get there, when you're first setting up shop, you've got to set up all these places to grow stuff and to make things that will sustain you. What's the timeline on that? How long do you keep, you can't eat the seed corn, but on the other hand, you have to eat something while you're waiting for the plants to grow. And how many plants do you need to have? And I mean, do you have a plan for that? Do you kind of see the trend and where that takes us?
I do. That's what I tried to solve for. Really accidental space founder in this arena is I looked at how to design a system that expands faster than it degrades. Ultimately, it's just how do you have in such an austere condition a system that truly expands. And that's the nice thing about using biology is that it's kind of your mini factory or your mini machine that also just replicates itself. Right. So if you bring a box that does X, Y, and Z, well, how do you make another box? Because that's a really hard case to kind of bootstrap from. So my timeline is very aggressive, just because that's the technology that support. That's the solution I came up with. But when looking into living off of Earth, especially, interesting Rick's post there on Artemis 2.0 and Mars, is this started as a very GrowMars, the company called GrowMars, started around the resources of Mars. And on the moon, you really are quite limited. At first, I kind of brushed off the moon, again, coming from outside of space, and said, well, there's no research, there's no atmosphere, there's no nitrogen there. Like, why are we gonna, it's closer, sure, you can abort easier and stuff. But it's interesting seeing the effort saying, oh, let's like the Mars is really hard. Let's have NASA focus on that. And then let's let the private industry deal with the moon, because it's hard. It's a hard economic case. It's really hard biologically without having carbon dioxide and especially nitrogen. So it's a good proving ground. I think in all the Moon versus Mars arguments, of which I was in I just got out of a 3-day workshop here in DC, called Achieving Mars. It's hosted by the Explore Mars group, and they've been at this this was the 12th workshop.
Yeah, those guys are good.
And I absolutely at the table with on the shoulders of giants, quite literally. And Scott Pace's words really, Dr. Pace's words really stuck with me, which is, why do we go to space? And it actually boils down to an even simpler question than I've tried to answer, is, do humans have a future in space? It's just a very blank question. It's just, do we have a place in space economically? Can we actually physically sustain in space? And it's an interesting, just broad question to try to answer, or goal to try to answer, is, do we have a role out there? Do we have a reason to be out there? Is it feasible? And to that, I say, we're not really architecting from the right and then kind of working backwards, is as far as goals and timelines. And like you said, with the seed corn analogy, is we're still stuck on 30-day missions, largely, for both the Moon and Mars. And beyond that, there's not too much evidence of a solution. And if you're trying to solve for it, you got to architect from the right and say, what do you really need? How do you survive, arrive with the resources for 2 people, and then after 5 years have the resources for 3 people? That's scale agnostic. It's not, let's have a city for 1 million people and then this will magically keep on self-sustaining. I think that argument's rather hollow if you're not taking kind of a first principles approach at this. I think it's rather agnostic of scale once you're off of Earth. So,
and technically, as you're saying, I think going to the Moon might be a 30-day mission. Going to Mars is not a 30-day mission. When you have those launch windows, you're at minimum, if you're doing it right, it's going to be at least 18 months on the ground.
Yeah,
maybe
surface
30. 30-month mission plans I've seen. So the kind of things that you're getting into and developing, I take a keen interest in, because you're going to have some great practice right away, having to kickstart a whole bunch of really interesting things and hope that they work.
30-day surface mission. I apologize there. So both the Moon missions aren't really architected out beyond 30 days, and same with most of the short-term Mars mission architectures. And why take those other solutions off? And it's interesting because you mentioned Space Symposium, NASA headquarters. I've been at Space Symposium. I've been at high-profile NASA meetings or around those folks. And it's interesting because, like, the really casual conversation is like, oh yeah, Mars, we're never going to be able to do it, or we have all these problems. And it's so interesting because so few people have actually tried to do this. Well, stay on the Moon, we haven't really tried to do that. We haven't tried to really go to Mars. So it's interesting hearing folks.
We can't sustain ourselves 250 miles up in orbit, right? Yeah. We haven't actually done the work to stay there.
It's stagnated since the mid-90s. If you look back into the literature, I did a fellowship with the Open Lunar Foundation, doing a real deep dive into this, and it's like it's perpetually 20 years into the future, because we haven't picked up like the last career cycle of where we kind of left off with a lot of this stuff in the mid-90s. The tech. Yeah. So how to break out of that bubble is a big one. And they know about the interesting thing is, you go back in the literature, and even in the mid-90s, they knew this like really super detailed technical problems that they were going to run into. There's more stuff published back 30 years ago about the real fine technical details of this stuff, where they were starting to chip away at that, versus now. Because right now in the literature, it's not. It's almost like we were really going to actually try to solve that problem in the mid-90s, late 90s, and then other directions went.
Is that when that's when the ISS was finally stamp approved and starting to get constructed? So am I reading between the lines that ISS killed lunar development. That's how I'm reading that.
Well, people had a pathway for the ISS to be used. It was supposed to be a stepping stone onto the moon and onto Mars.
Yep.
In a variety of different ways.
And the space shuttle was supposed to fly every week. Yep, I know that.
And it never matured. One thing, artificial gravity, right? That was supposed to happen. That really lowers your hardware cost, right? Now you don't have to have everything microgravity resilient. You can do distillation, vapors separate, and everything like that. So
we can't even test artificial gravity. Look, 24 years ago at a Mars Society conference in San Jose, California, I saw people from MIT present a concept which they called the Mars Gravity Biosatellite.
Yep.
They're going to launch an Apollo-like capsule that had basically at the bottom rounded area of it on the inside a giant habitrail kind of thing that they were going to spin along that longitudinal axis and put mice in there and then shoot this thing out beyond the moon for a month or two and let the mice do what mice would do naturally at either moon gravity or Mars gravity, specifically like 0.39 G, and then bring the capsule back and see what happened to them. And that idea was on the table by top people at MIT 24 years ago, and we still haven't done it. We can't even get that done.
I brought that up at the last workshop specifically. The cool thing though, and I don't have a technical background in any of this, and I haven't read much about it, any of these plans, but it's interesting seeing Starship being hung by those 2 points.
Yeah.
Right. Because you put 2 starships and you put them in a large radius, and how can that de-risk a Mars mission? Right. First off, you could have it just out in deep space for 6 months, spin them up in artificial gravity at 1/3. Great. You're for the humans and for the systems. Now you're at 13 G. You can test those operations and then fly it back to Earth, land it on Earth, refuel it, and go again. We could do a Mars mission in 2 years if that could be done.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anything about that. And it was interesting, the pushback on artificial gravity as, no, it's nothing like you. Oh, it's too risky with it. So now artificial gravity is this big polarized item where it's like, we can't do spacewalks. We can't do this, blah, blah. It's not going to really de-risk some of these things. And to that point, I often say, once we're on there's that kind of vein. I think that this could be near term completed from a technical challenges standpoint. And then there's the other moon versus Mars element where I think if you take all right, we got to go to the moon first approach. Well, then that's what we should be trying to do is stay on the moon for a year, right? Or stay at NRHO for a year or something like that. Right. At Gateway. And
build it along the ISS model, but it's the ISS on the moon.
Yeah.
And guys are serving a rotation 6 months or a year, and they keep the consistent occupancy.
Yep. And it's something that we just have not done in these long pole technologies. This has been identified as this big tech gap for so long, and yet we're not trying to actually do it. We're not trying to stay in deep space. There's still no plans to have people in deep space for a long time, and it's just really interesting that problem persists. And it's something that I'm trying to break.
Well, let's talk about what you're doing, specifically. Like, we talk about this show is a show that's the intersection between space and money. And we sometimes have, big giant companies. Mostly we have small entrepreneurs, companies that are trying to build something. Last week, we had Jason, who his words were, it took 17 years to become an overnight success, right? So, and now he's got 50 people working for him, but it was a slog. It's a grind in this business. So, how long you been at it? What's that kind of entrepreneurial story? Where do you go fishing when you're trying to aim for contracts, and what's successes or setbacks?
Yeah, I started seriously. So this came off of a whiteboard in a hackerspace, makerspace in Tampa, Florida. We're all sitting around watching SpaceX. We said, well, and learning how to 3D print, right? This was 2014, 2015. 3D printers were just getting up.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, well, could this, colonizing Mars, how could this really work? And I had a little bit of insight around plastics and how not all bio-derived plastics are biodegradable, is you can actually have a non-biodegradable clear plastic. And that came from a lot of my agricultural, we use a lot of plastic for irrigation tubing and plastic mulch and stuff. And it was just this little nugget of information that I knew on, it's just weird, right? You think of like, if it's derived from oil, then you make it non-biodegradable. If you take it from fresh biomass, you think of oil as just really old biomass, and then it kind of makes sense. Oh, there's nothing magical in the oil. It's just an old hydrocarbon you can distill out the same chemicals from to make a clear plastic. So in the realm of Mars, I said, okay, you've got CO2 in the atmosphere. You can grow a hydrocarbon plant mass, and all the inedible roots, stems, leaves, you can distill that down into clear plastic to make more greenhouses exponentially and bootstrap your greenhouse production system. And
I want everybody to get that. You're going to take the stuff you can't use from a plant and turn that into greenhouse material to grow more plants.
That's it. And it was as simple as that. And it was just what would that look like? Like, what mass would that look like? Again, totally coming from outside the bubble, just taking a first kind of principles approach to how do you expand out your resource capturing surface area? And it very much biomimics exactly how a plant grows. So if you start with a seed and it emerges with 1 or 2 leaves, if it's a monocot or dicot, how do plants grow? They basically do the same process. They just don't use polymers, plastic polymers. They use a waxy cuticle, and they use cell walls and membranes, and they use polymers, but we don't think of them that way. So we just need to, so it's very much biomimicry of how plants use a massive amount of carbon dioxide to build themselves. And you just don't really think of that intuitively, because you don't have to feed them carbon dioxide here. You don't look at a plant and say, oh, that's 95% CO2 and water.
Right.
Most people will go their entire lives and never really understand that.
I'm like, I don't have to give this any new gases, right?
Yeah.
All the gases are here. Yep.
The nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all those things, it's like less than 5%, of the mass of the plant. And then plastics, there's none of those in there. So literally plastics are just CO2 and water, ultimately, elementally, from if they're bio-derived. So that's how I very accidentally would just, hey, what about this? Started down the SBIR, STTR path with NASA. Did an aerospace accelerator actually in 2018, and Tom's paper on space accelerators in space I found very interesting about 6 months ago. And
is that Tom's space scalable document? Which one is that?
An overview of the relative ability of incubators and accelerators to nurture and fund space-related startup enterprises.
But will it blend?
But will it blend? So it's interesting. When I entered that ecosystem, I said, well, here's an interesting deep technology, and everyone's looking for that dual space and Earth base use. And I very prominently, I had a retired NASA engineer, one of the most respected, Tony Muscatello. There along, I pulled it. Actually, I saw a presentation at the Mars Society virtually from Tony, and I said, I think he'll get it. I think he'll. I've got something here.
I met Tony years and years ago. He's an amazing guy. He's very sharp.
So fortunate to meet Tony and have him go through this. And really, I was trying to break it because I was like kind of frustrated at this point. It was 2 years in. I was like, hey, how do I get this going? How do I get some traction on this? And we got the very typical VC, dual Earth-based and space-based. And I had to hit a pause there because it was like, this was 2018. And I said, not like the environment and economics of space are nothing like that of Earth. So you could have a great space technology and it has just no near-term application or marketability economics on Earth. It's not, they're not mutually exclusive. The domains are so different. And I said, I'm going to hang my hat. I'm not going to try to pivot or do a lot of these other things. I'm just going to say it black and white. Like, this is a space tech. This is a deep tech. There may not be any near-term applications. Then we did go ahead with the patent. It was interesting enough because of carbon sequestration, as it looked like this would be, as much as it wasn't designed to do it, doing large-scale exponential carbon sequestration, carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere really wasn't a thing. And as a market back in 2018, and I saw a lot of geoengineering solutions that just didn't have any traction behind them. So I said, you know what, between the space and the carbon market, maybe this will be something useful. And back at those times, I mean, Jeff and Elon were kind of at a patent war with over like drone ship landing and stuff.
Right.
And it was like, wow, like this could be a very pivotal, this could be a very keystone element to how to keep humans in space. That, that was one reason why I kind of I patented it was I think it was something that should be pursued kind of independent of kind of the rocket companies, more or less. Looking at the landscape and looking how tough it was. I mean, people told me point blank how difficult this stuff was going to be, all the way from the makerspace. People that had dealt with commercial space before, they were like, it's hardball out there. I mean, I got very fair warning about what I went after, but I'm after challenges. I mean, I became a doctor. I'm a Connecticut kid who became a agricultural consultant in Florida.
Okay.
I'm very passionate about plant sciences, very passionate about the business behind it. The environmental impacts. I mean, science has just been something that's core to me. And I love doing it. And there's so many problems to fix. It's a lot like agricultural problems. There's so many things, and between plant diseases, insects, soil issues. I mean, there's so many fires to put out in agriculture and so few people working on it. Space is another one of those domains where there's just ultimately limited decision makers, a lot of deep knowledge that's needed in these things to really understand. And it's a very multi-tiered, there's the social aspect of it, there's the environmental aspect of it, the economics, the science. It's a very multi-legged stool that it really needs to progress. So it has a lot of unique analogies to working in commercial agriculture as well, crossing into space.
Okay, here's the thing. It's the when you're building something like that on another planet, especially. I mean, you really have much tighter constraints in terms of your system has to become very, very closed loop. And so, what do you think of the folks who are doing things like Biosphere 2 and stuff like that? And how does that help or hurt the cause, so to speak, of having some good biology in space that we can use to breathe and eat?
I think we can use biology as a tool. Whatever tool we use, I think we have to just show that it's expandable and reproducible. It's scalable. So I think it will be a hybrid of solutions. Some, like you said, having that closed loop, a perfect closed loop, I don't think that really should be what we should strive for. We should strive for one that kind of expands. So no one really built a whole bunch of Biosphere 2s. Said, oh, this is such a great thing. Let's build a whole bunch more. And really, once you're outside of Earth's atmosphere, like the huge buffer of atmosphere and water, once you shrink that down to even something as small as Biosphere with human in a loop, you may as well just shrink it down even smaller, because it's already you're already in such a small loop that you have to be conscious of. So I think the scale of that was probably a little bit actually too large.
Really?
Yeah. I think, I mean, it was unrealistic, right? You never, okay, now how do you build another one of these, right? On the moon or on Mars? It wasn't, and I think a lot of the problems they had there, it was a good thing to do. It definitely progressed some of the science of this, but it ultimately, no one reproduced it. And I think it lacked the element of reproducibility. No one stared at that and said, oh yeah, we could build another one, in 10 or 15 years. So, I think it will be a hybrid of solutions, though. Things, to capture that kind of 5%.
Okay.
I think the Chinese did it pretty well with their Lunar Palace. They did they're really the ones that did the most recent closed loop system back in 2014 with the Lunar Palace. And there they said 98% loop closure. And I think that's about right. I mean, you have things that you just, have another mechanism there to inorganically compost them, use supercritical water oxidation or something to get some of the toughest pollutants out and stuff like that.
That's
And
where,
yeah.
That's where I've been thinking for a while that where I keep thinking you've got a lot of applications, right? So chatting with the folks at Vast or Gravitics or Axiom or Voyager or Blue Origin's, what's that thing called? Orbital Reef. There's folks that probably could handle a small piece of cargo from you. Is there any way to build a small prototype that could actually fly, go to one of the stations, and is there something that you could do with that?
Yeah, we actually, it took 8 years to figure out kind of a dual use Earth and space application.
Okay.
And I call it a thermal mass integrated greenhouse. On Earth, it looks like a clear plastic tube that you lower and raise out of a 6-inch drilled hole into the Earth. And I tested that this past iteration. And in space, I think that's about the right size that these guys will start integrating with. Is if they, in an airlock situation or another situation, you have a external greenhouse element that can raise and lower in and out of an area to show both the thermodynamics, the operation feasibility of it. But you're always treated, unfortunately, as a tech demonstration and as a customer, not really a service provider. So it's hard to bridge that gap. Is do you really come in and say, hey, we can do something really big and provide enough resources? We've tried that, but it's we're always, we're a lot of this. You're kind of just treated as a customer. Great. You want to do something in space, go get money from wherever and come to us as an engineering solution or as a flight demonstration. And that's a really hard bridge I've found across. Because it's not investable. I've had a number of conversations with folks that are really interested in space and new tech, and they see what we're doing is really different. But I just am honest. There's not a revenue stream. There's not an ROI on this. I mean, I'm still 100%, owner of this, and haven't taken. I've turned down a lot of the very typical kind of early seed stage funding opportunities because I think it would be really a disservice to any valuation that would really get this off the ground. So I'm focused mostly on the customer end of this. Is how do we actually turn this into how do we get that demand signal out there to say, hey, this is something real that we can go after.
Morty's
asking you right now, how much do you need
to get a noticeable impact?
Yeah, I think I think we need that demand signal if we're going to actually stay on the moon for a year, or we're going to do a Mars mission for 500 days, which for refueling considerations on Mars, that is the architecture,
right?
Is that you can't refuel a heavy lift vehicle on Mars in 30 days. You'd have to have pre-positioned fuel depot and ISRU, and that's 10 years out, which is a way longer horizon than I was looking to throw this on a Red Dragon for all of those folks that are like 2018, 2019, right? We're going to do Red Dragon down to the surface. All right. How do I get a payload on that? Right. As a demonstration.
Right.
So.
Right on. All right. We're going to transition off. Dr. Tompkins, really great having you. Love having you around. Would like to know more about the business behind this business. So let's stay in touch as always, and we'd love to have you back in a couple of months and see what you're up to. That's all I've got. Anything else?
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, Dr. Daniel Tompkins. Thank you for joining us. We will see you again, I promise you. This is a very fun area to talk about. So, all right. Michael, and good night to you as well. Thursday, we have Kwang Han K, who is chairman of Grand Systems. They're a launch company based out of Taiwan, but they also have an office in Houston, it turns out. I'm reaching out to him. We're going to talk about the specific niche their business fills and some of the challenges they face. Now, just before I go, I'll remind you again, we do have that lovely QR code in the upper left corner of the screen. And of course, all of you who've joined us tonight, whether you're signed up or not, I hope you like the show and keep coming back and tell your friends and neighbors and your host associates to come and check out some really interesting stuff that we do. And until next time, Thursday night, from the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, I'm Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.